How do you feel? Don't you understand that the people who do this thing, who practice racism,
right,
are bereft? There is something distorted about the psyche. It's a huge waste, and it's a corruption and a distortion. It's a profound neurosis that nobody examines for what it is. It feels crazy. It is crazy. And it has just as much of a deleterious effect on white people, and possibly equal, as it does black people. I always knew that I had the moral high ground all my life. I always thought those people who said I couldn't come in the drugstore and I had to sit in these funny places, I couldn't go in the park.
You felt morally superior to them from day one.
But if the racist white person, I don't mean the person who is examining his consciousness and so on, doesn't understand that he or she is also a race, it's also constructed, it's also made, and it also has some kind of serviceability. But when you take it away, I take your race away. And there you are, all strung out, and all you got is your little self. And what is that? What are you without racism? Are you any good? Are you still strong? You still smart? You still like yourself? I mean, these are the questions. Part of it is, yes, the victim, how terrible it has been for black people.
You don't like that.
I'm not a victim. I refuse to be one.
And the victim is the other person who is morally inferior, who
of course.
Racism
if you have to hold,
for his or her own self-esteem and definition.
If you can only be tall because somebody's on their knees, then you have a serious problem. And my feeling is white people have a very, very serious problem. And they should start thinking about what they can do about it. Take me out of it.
Or can really testify, too, about what it means to be an American. Some things happened on this continent. They actually happened. For example, we killed the Indians. We really did. And those who survived are now on reservation. But you wouldn't discover this fact, by looking at a TV program or by reading most of the textbook, which is much more sinister. That's just for example. But again, for another example, we needed cheap labor for all that cotton. And we really did. And so we got it. And decided it was happy, hoeing all that cotton. Now, I never believed it, but the country did. What I really want to talk about tonight, speculate with you about tonight, is not so much the past, though I must say that probably the leitmotif of what I'm trying to say is that the people who do not know what their past is, don't know what their present is, and the people of whom this is true, probably have no future. I want to speculate tonight about something which I arbitrarily call demoralization, which is the effect in a person of being robbed of his sense of his human value. Of all the things we've had to learn since we were 5, if one remembers that a child coming out of the womb is neither white nor black, but simply another human being who has arrived on earth. Now, if you're a Negro child and you're born in this country, a very brutal rupture occurs around the time of 5 or 6 or 8, but it has certainly occurred by the time you are 14. And the rupture is this. The rupture occurs at the moment you open your eyes on what I have to call now the big world, by which I mean, in this case, the American Republic. And the child is forced to realize, without knowing that he realizes it, because he is still a child, that his mother and his father, who until this terrible moment, which as I say is mainly an unremembered moment, had held up the world for him, who were his protection, and his right to be in the world, are under certain limits themselves. There's some things they cannot protect him from. The child understands this and has to begin to adjust himself around it. But that's not all. Because on one level, one way or another, this probably happens to all children born anywhere in the world at any time. It is the beginning, as we like to say, of consciousness. But in the case of a black child born in this country, when he opens his eyes on what we call the big world, he discovers 2 terrifying things. First of all, he discovers that he does not exist in it. no matter where he looked, by which I mean books, magazines, movies, there is no reflection of himself anywhere. Or, if there is something in the book, and I mean by now also textbooks which are used in all our schools, if he looks for himself and he finds anything which looks like him, he is authoritatively assured that this is a savage or a comedian who has never contributed anything to civilization. And that's not all. Then he begins to wonder how he, who is, as somebody else put it, half the size of the rest of the world, got a nickel to his name, is going to survive this brutality. And again, according to me, that is the root, the beginning of this demoralization. They're after you because you were and you are. I mean, when I say you, I mean us. All black men in this country. You got here because they needed cheap labor, and you still are. We all are a source of cheap labor. Well, let's say that's all right. What happened to white Americans was that in order to justify the need for cheap labor, they had to invent for their own peace of mind. They had to say two things at once. And you can check me out. I'm not inventing this. They said two things at once. They said, A, you were cheap labor because you were inferior, and B, you were inferior because you were a source of cheap labor. A whole race of people who are not African. I'm very dark, but I'm not dark when I'm in Africa. And as somebody put it, as I keep saying, it is not because my grandmother raped anybody. And let us say even that that's all right, Bloodshed, kidnapping, slavery, and rape are old human endeavors. But what is not all right, if the person or the nation intends to survive, is that you do these things and pretend you didn't and invent a system, a legal system called segregation, designed according to the white Americans to keep the Negro in his place, but designed really to allow the white American to disown his sister and his daughter and his son, to make out of the things which really drive all people a travesty. And that is another kind of demoralization. That is the kind of demoralization which produces, for example, Bull Connor, who in a more enlightened age, or perhaps in another country, would be called a sadist. It produces such a man as the chief of police in Birmingham, whose name when I was there is Jamie Moore, and I guess he still is, who told me, without batting an eye, that there was no racial problem in Birmingham. Boy. Now I don't object to the existence under heaven of people like Bull Connor and Senator Eastland and J. Edgar Hoover and Senator Russell and Senator Byrd. They have a right to live, but they have no right to their power. And the system which gives them this power is a system in great, great danger.